If you're joining us just now, you're taking a live look at Garner Field in Uvalde, Texas. The president and the first lady are getting ready to leave Uvalde after a jam-packed day. They arrived there around 11 o'clock this morning. They went straight to the school, Robb Elementary, and paid their respects at the school. You can only imagine the emotion that was going through them when they saw that growing memorial there at the school. And then around noon today, the president and first lady attended mass at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. And around 1:30, they met with families of the victims as well as survivors for about three and a half hours. And then they just wrapped up meeting with first responders. So this is Dr. Jill Biden and President Joe Biden now getting on to Marine One. They will leave here in just a matter of minutes, and then they will fly from Uvalde back here to San Antonio, arrive at Kelly Field, and we will go back out live to Kelly Field in just a bit. We've got reporter Sarah Duran standing by, and then they will leave Kelly Field in San Antonio around 6:45 before departing back to Delaware.
And in meeting with these first responders, they talked with them for about an hour. You had multiple agencies responding to this scene. You had Uvalde CISD Police, Border Patrol, Texas Rangers, afterwards DPS, and you can imagine the scene that they arrived to, and as soon as they opened the door to the classroom and confronted the gunman, the feelings there, as many of those officers had children at Robb Elementary School. So you had that response obviously at the school. And then as that was happening throughout the day, you had emergency crews from across South Texas go to Uvalde and stand by for help. For example, right down the street on Main Street in Uvalde from the Civic Center, where parents were instructed to pick up their children on the day of the shooting, you had a staging area for law enforcement vehicles. You had ambulances, for example, for first responders from Bandera County, from Valverde, from areas around Uvalde that were just ready for the call in case first responders on the scene needed their help in any sort of way. And so you have these conversations that are much needed, and this is another entity that will, I'm sure, be grieving for a very, very long time.
Yeah, mixed emotions, a lot of grief also, though, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration as well, understandably so. And of course, we do now know as of today that the DOJ will be conducting a review of how the situation was handled by law enforcement there on the scene. That will be made public, and then of course we'll see what happens from there. A lot of people asking for accountability, but first we'll see what the DOJ says, how everything was handled. But again, you're taking a live look at Garner Field in Uvalde, Marine One, with President Joe Biden and the First Lady, Dr. Joe Biden, getting ready to take off from Uvalde and head back here to San Antonio. They'll arrive at Kelly Field around 6:45 before leaving San Antonio and headed back to Delaware.
So yesterday, President Biden was at his alma mater. He was at the University of Delaware, and he delivered a commencement address. And in his speech, you know, he was addressing these mass shootings, like you mentioned earlier, the shooting at the Buffalo supermarket and then the shooting in Uvalde. And he told graduates yesterday, he said, in the face of such destructive forces, we have to stand stronger. He said, we cannot outlaw tragedy, but we can make America safer. And in his closing remarks, he said, no generation gets to choose what world they graduate into, but a few generations enter at a point in history where they have the power to change the trajectory of a nation. And you can. And so you mentioned also earlier how he related to these parents as he was visiting with them for hours, how he has also lost a child, you know, so I think
two children.
Pardon me, yes, 2 children. And so I'm curious to see how these families responded, because our reporters who are on scene, they say that he's getting mixed reactions. So curious to see how these families feel after a visit from the President of the United States. I mean, I know this community is exhausted. We heard from people who were not directly affected, as in they didn't have a family member who perished in this, but how they are hurting and how they couldn't get out of bed for days and they couldn't eat for days. We interviewed a teacher who was a father of a teacher, fourth grade teacher, who was 3 doors down from the classroom where all of these students and their 2 teachers were killed. And he said, my family, we just can't sleep. It's almost like we feel a sense of guilt. We can't wake up without thinking, was this all a nightmare? Did this all really happen? And you have some teachers who are considering a career change if protection isn't provided in a different way for these classrooms, for these schools. So these conversations are just starting to emerge about what do we do from here. And Henry asked Senator Roland Gutierrez, what can we do from here? And he said, we hopefully can make change starting in Austin.
Yeah, and you can understand at the same time the frustration and the skepticism that a lot of Americans have, because keep in mind, it was 10 years ago, 2012, when Sandy Hook Elementary had that massacre at their school that killed 20 kids, 6 teachers. And that was when Joe Biden was vice president. Fast forward 10 years, and here we are, and he's playing the role of consoler in chief, and now he's having to deal with another mass shooting inside an elementary school. The last place you would think something like that would happen.
And he isn't the first, should I say, not celebrity, but big name to visit Uvalde. You have people from all over Texas, all over the nation going to pay their respects. We saw Meghan Markle this week. Matthew McConaughey is from Uvalde. He was there shortly after the shooting, just a couple of days after. So this is something that has really, really touched our nation, to see the faces of these children and their plans for the future and their families who just, it's so devastating. Some had to identify their child through a DNA sample. This is still raw for many of these families. Just days have passed since this has happened. So we look forward to see what can be done from here. We have optimism, we have skepticism. So we'll see what difference maybe this visit can make. I know a lot of people, like we mentioned earlier, they're trying to see what can happen with Robb Elementary School.
Yeah, and you're taking a live look at Marine One leaving Garner Field in Uvalde, Texas, carrying the president as well as First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. They are now headed back here to San Antonio and will arrive at Kelly Field around 6:45. We will go back out to Kelly Field live. That's where our reporter Sarah Duran is standing by. She's waiting for the president to arrive, and then he'll jump on to Air Force One before heading out to Delaware.